So, what's diversity? Now that we've been at this for 3 weeks, raise your hand if you really thought before you signed up for this class that it was going to be that most of the 10 weeks were going to be taken up with what would be an expanded Black History Month with a little sprinkling of English as a second language sprinkled on top. You're finding out that diversity is a lot more than that. Even in homogeneous communities that would be either all Black or all white or all Hispanic or all anything, there's diversity even in that. So I know that it's expands. Many people really enjoy this class because it causes you to think of things that if you weren't in this class, you may not have ever encountered before. Um, I want to explain, I'm going to give an example of communities we have lived in our own lives as a Doyle family, that says something about diversity, that it isn't only color. It is so many other things. The elementary school that my children went to only had one African American family in it. However, I would say that a quarter to a third of the students in the class were Jewish. Another third were Catholic, and another third were Christians of various denominations. And if you would have asked those Christians of various denominations what their religion was, they wouldn't have answered Christian. They would have said Congregationalist or Episcopalian or Presbyterian, but they probably wouldn't have just done the shorthand Christian. And I think part of that would have been because they, in the last 20 years, that term has kind of come to represent evangelical Christians, of which in the area where we raised our children, there were probably few or none. So there actually was religious diversity, when in some other places that even would be, all Hispanic and Catholic or all African American and evangelical Christian, they wouldn't have had as much religious diversity as we did, even though most people would identify as white. They were also sprinkling, where our children grew up, of Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists. So, what is diversity? We moved to another state and another town where it was probably about a quarter African American and the rest Caucasian. And actually, many of the historic Tuskegee Airmen still lived there when they were alive in the town we lived in. So that was very interesting. However, there was absolutely no religious diversity in this town that was racially mixed Black and white. There was one Jewish family in a town of about 40,000. There was one Asian family. Oh, and that's the other thing that I should say, where we originally raised our children, there were many Asian families. So, it was mixed in that way. Asian, Jewish, various types of Christians. But in this other town that was mixed racially, there was very, very, very little religious diversity. The religious diversity would have been everybody's a Christian, but some are Catholics and some are evangelical Christians. So, again, what's diversity? Princess in your class mentioned that her perception of diversity that she used to think of before this class began, she's realizing is really only one small piece of the puzzle, and that is the takeaway for most people by the end of week 3, and they even get more into it, and I hope you are too. And it's just like, oh my goodness, what else can I discover? In the week 3 course documents, there were 2 things that I had mentioned were really important in the top of the documents under objectives and the text reading assignments. 2 things that were really important. And one, Princess also named, the explicit and the implicit. Most of you would never, ever explicitly exhibit um, uh, discriminatory behaviors. Okay, you've been taught better than that, as many of you said in social identities portraits and on discussion board. However, how you personally react to someone's name, and I also have this in week 3 course documents up at the top about in the pay attention section, may show inner bias that you don't even realize that you have until it's pointed out. Some of you even mentioned to some of the other people in class, well, I never would have known that you were adopted from Russia, or I wouldn't have known that you are originally from Congo because your name doesn't indicate that to me. I had a student teacher a few years ago whose name was Tammy Bowers. Picture whoever you are in your head, picture who you think Tammy Bowers is, was, will be. Okay, Tammy Bowers is African American. Okay. I know a woman named, a young woman, to me anyway, whose name is Michaela Murphy. Picture in your mind who Michaela Murphy might be. She was raised in Cooperstown, New York, where the Baseball Hall of Fame is. Michaela Murphy is Korean. She was adopted as an infant by her parents, who raised her in Cooperstown, New York, but she maybe isn't what you pictured. Picture Helen Rodriguez. Helen's, original name was Helen Smith. She married a man named Rodriguez. Okay, Barbara Goldblatt. Her original name was Barbara Jones, but she married a Jewish man. So think about how names, you could say, well, that doesn't sound, fill in the blank of ethnicity. Or you don't look, fill in the blank of ethnicity. Those types of comments are actually showing the bias that you had, and you may not even realize it. So it's just more fodder for your schema, more fodder for what you're thinking about. Okay, something that Jessica, that bias, I'm sorry, the word implicit then is that it's an implicit misunderstood, or misunderstood by you. It's an implicit bias that you have. It isn't outward, it's inward. Okay, so I'm sorry, I forgot to bring up that actual word. Jessica Melvin brought up Mennonites in her class, and it made me think of, okay, Mennonites, Orthodox Jewish women, Muslim women. What links all these people together? Well, Mennonite women have long skirts and cover their heads with the white cap, or it can be another cap, another color cap. Orthodox Jewish women wear long skirts, and they wear a wig on top of their real hair, so that no one but their husband can see their real hair. Muslim women, as we know, do the same thing. So they cover their hair except in the presence of their husband and family, and wear long clothes. And that all three of those diverse groups, Mennonites, Orthodox Jews, and Muslim women, are all doing it because of the same passages in their sacred scriptures, in their texts. So it's just different ways, different cultural ways of doing that. Carrie Ann brought up corned beef and cabbage from her Irish family, which I totally understand. And in week 8, when we do holidays, I'll write in an announcement what I used to do with our children's classrooms and teachers when they were in about 2nd grade, when that holiday rolled around. But okay, corned beef is made from brisket, beef brisket, which is one of the cheapest cuts of beef. Barbecue brisket is made from the same cut of meat. Brisket is big in kosher families from the same cut of meat, but make sure that it comes from a kosher butcher. So, this is something that's, Irish, Jewish, and barbecue can be lots of different ethnicities, from Creole to African American to all sorts of things. So, but it all is brisket. Okay. Is diversity starting to, are you starting to think of diversity a little bit differently now? Okay, the final thing I wanted to talk about was cultural discontinuity, which you all wrote about so well in your posts and discussion board, and some of you had cultural discontinuity as younger people, and that you wrote about in your social identities portrait. The manners discussion actually has something to do with cultural discontinuity. There is a difference in what the behavior that's expected at school from the behavior from the culture of that family, no matter what ethnicity that family is, if they haven't taught manners. It is just as it is up to us as teachers to teach conventions of American speech and conventions of all sorts of other assimilative techniques. It is your role as teachers of young children to assimilate them to what good manners is in this country. And it's fine to work with the families, and it's fine to say this is what is expected at school, even if it's different from home. Because what can happen is, just like a child who came in speaking Romanian, who learns more English and teaches Romanian parents more English, a child who is learning standard manners can take that home and eventually impart that to his or her own family at home. So cultural discontinuity doesn't have to be language, doesn't have to be Chinese food, doesn't have to, it can be something like manners, that the culture of the child's own family is not standard to what we think of as the norm. Okay, good luck on your papers with multicultural resources. I can't wait to see what you guys come up with as far as books and toys and all sorts of things. You're doing a great job. Keep up the good work.